AI is incredibly good at modeling any number of things. But the reality is that it's going to hallucinate some scenarios and you have to toss those things out. But how do you identify scenarios? The reason how you do it is you basically say, this is not physically possible. And
Mm.
it's not personally possible for like 70-year-old grandma, Mrs. Smith, to actually do a backflip down the stairs in some kind of like dragon, like crouching tiger scenario. And also she lives in a one-story home.
They say it's lonely at the top. They're right. But you don't have to scale your company alone. Welcome to the Scaling CEO. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. On this podcast, I sit down with top performing CEOs to uncover the hidden patterns and frameworks behind their success so you can avoid common pitfalls and accelerate your company's growth. Now, on to the show. Today, on the Scaling CEO, we're joined by Chia-Lin Simmons. Her career is a masterclass in navigating and leading at the edge of technology. She's been in the trenches at giants like Google and Amazon's Audible, helping to build what we now consider the fabric of our digital lives. But she didn't stop there. She's also a founder, launching an AI startup and diving headfirst into the entrepreneurial world. Currently, as the CEO of LogicMark, a publicly traded company, she's tackling the care economy using technology to help people age safely and with dignity. Beyond her executive roles, Chia-Lin is a director for both public and private companies, including a $4.8 billion global business, and is involved in the venture capital world, investing in and mentoring the next wave of tech innovators. She's seen scale from every possible angle, from Fortune 50 behemoths to pre-seed startups. Her perspective is rare, direct, and exactly what we need to hear. Chia-Lin, welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Glenn. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you've been in the engine rooms of Google and Amazon, and you've built startups from scratch. When you look back, what's the one scaling insight that, had you known it earlier, would have saved you months of pain and energy?
That's a really great question. And so in almost every organization, regardless of size and scale, there's always one or two critical issues that is the major driver for stalling growth or keeping the company from truly scaling the way that it actually should be. And let's be candid, there's always more than one issue. And
Of
so
course.
it's the sort of identification of that one or two problems immediately and then solving towards those maniacally. And so what I see a lot of things happening is that, organizations have so many issues that people spread themselves incredibly thin. And so
Mm,
they try to fight multiple fires concurrently at the same time. When what they're really lacking the capability of doing is identifying the one or two major issues that are basically the stalls that are, stopping everybody from growth. And so the identification of those and just that straight focus is the key that is really what is a major driver for success. So
and I'm really glad you brought that up because the CEO, generally speaking, is overwhelmed with the number of things that seem equally important to handle. And what you're saying is we have to understand ultimately what is really going to be our lever. What is the one or two or three things that we need to really, really focus on in order to scale and not try to get everything done and spread ourselves too thin.
absolutely. And I also think that, what those levers are will change with time as you're, matriculating with the organization, right? And
Right.
so maybe when you start off with the organization that their major, the major drivers for success is actually, for example, at Google, growing and utilizing partners to scale your growth effectively, right? When I came on board, they actually were not well managing their partnerships, and those partnerships had the capability for them to basically grow exponentially. For example, things like music trials. At the time that I joined, I think there were about like a 3% contribution for the music trials that we were driving for Google Play Music. But what we were able to do was to leverage those relationships to scale those contributions to 33%, which, in 18 months is quite a lot. But it was because we didn't realize that the utilization of those partnerships were the crucial driver towards success. Leveraging other people's money, love doing that all day.
Right.
way, towards helping us grow our business. We just were neglecting it. And it's a very large organization. And so for them, it's a pittance, but that pittance of marketing money actually helped us scale exponentially at a portion of the business that was not really growing as well as they would have liked. So,
Fantastic example. Thank you for sharing that. Now, your career spans e-commerce and digital media and IoT and now the care economy with LogicMark. Most leaders get stuck in one vertical, and you seem to thrive on jumping into new territories. What's the biggest blind spot you see in other CEOs who are trying to scale but are maybe too deeply entrenched in their own industry's way of thinking?
yeah, I've been very fortunate to have been given the opportunity to sort of, I guess, apply my perspective and expertise in a multitude of different sort of industry. And I think the sort of driving thread amongst those is that the identification of much more of a human centric approach to scaling businesses and growing.
Oh, good. Talk more about that.
Yeah. So, the sort of binding thread amongst all of the sort of business I've been in is that, are we building products that actually are reaching people in their pain points? And are we able to see what not just their current pain points are, but basically are we able to sort of identify what their pain points are ahead of us? A year, 3 years, 5 years from now. Because in the tech industry, we tend to be very focused on two things, which is either that we're building really cool products. And so then we build something really cool because the technology is available to us, like AI. And then we're looking for customers to utilize that technology and
Right.
adapt the technology. And that's sort of one approach. If you build it, they will come,
Right.
which again, we're not the field of dreams. This is not the if you build it, they will come. Or the solution is that we're going to have this pain point 10 years, 20 years from now. And so let the VCs and let us be the people to basically get there and, invest and build that technology so that we can solve this problem that we will see 10 years from now.
Beautiful.
And, rules change, you know,
Right, but that applies to any industry, any CEO role,
absolutely.
looking ahead and saying, "How are we gonna solve the problems that are coming up?" As opposed to just necessarily what exists today.
Absolutely. It's that you have to be focused on what the pain points are from the industry that you're trying to serve, what that pain point is now, anticipating what that pain point looks like 1 year, 3 year, 5 years from now. Those are at least short enough time frames in many ways for technology for us to be able to address them properly, with most importantly the capability to recoup on those investments. Not here's a problem 10 years from now, and so I'm going to do quantum computing. And so that's great, except that you're not gonna monetize
Right,
because this technology is 10 years ahead of its time, right? And
right.
it's solving anybody's actual pain points now. So,
Well, let's dive into this just a little bit more deeply. You said you're passionate about delivering cutting edge technologies that change people's lives. And at LogicMark, you're focused on a deeply human issue, which is aging in place. So how do you bring your vision for helping and changing people's lives to the day-to-day grind of scaling a company?
yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time thinking about, why do we do what we do? Because let's just be honest, like launching new technology companies, or in our case, pivoting a company that had been a hardware only company to a connected care, hyper personalized, sort of personalized care business is a grind. We're trying to build basically a startup in a public eye and build entire suites of technology from the floor up. It is often thrilling, and for anybody who's been in the VC-backed world of technology, it's like you've got the highs and the lows of being in a startup. Like days, the highs are highs and the lows are lows, and it's a
Right,
grind.
right,
What really drives us as a business is that, we really get hyper focused on the people that we're serving every day, what their pain points are, how are we spending time like talking to them, what are we hearing back from our customers, what are the things that we need to resolve, and what are the things that they are, hearing from their own family members, right? So we use that time to basically hear things like, you know, it's not enough that, this technology helps my parent who's falling. Like this is going off too often. And so, my dad hates it so much because it's going off all the time that I just turned off fall detection and then lo and behold, they fell. So
mm,
we identified and said, this is the pain point that it's either too sensitive or not sensitive enough. So how do
Right.
we get accurate so that people wanna wear it and it's not a grind on them, right? We look at things like, "Hey, do you have anything that's, helping not just helping my dad, like, getting help that they need, but maybe, can you nudge my dad into taking medicine?"
Right.
Sure. Yeah, like, maybe not immediately, and as I told one of my salespeople, an amazing woman named Kathy Neighbors, I was just like, "We might not be able to do it now, but somewhere in the back of our minds, all of us are, like, grinding away in our heads, like, that's a problem." And so we filed it and, you're showering one day and you're like, "Hmm, like, I gotta solve this." So that focus, that's just really strong focus on our customers and what they're saying, they populate our heads. And
Right.
we basically are like little voices in our head constantly saying, like, "We need to resolve these issues." Are we the right people to solve that issue? And then 2, can we resolve it and solve it in a way that is, I think not gonna just help them in their day-to-day sort of situation now, but can help them in the future. So, for example, the medicine reminder piece, right? We can solve your problem now, like, that you're taking your meds and you're gonna be okay, but we also think about ahead of time, which is, what does it mean to be adherent to meds? And, what does med adherence mean and non-med adherence mean in terms of your overall health and your you know, possibility of a fall. And so we think about, so knowing this and not knowing this or taking it or not taking it, how does that impact the future for you? And so
Yeah.
building things to anticipate that if you don't take it, like how do we sort of help you? And, how does that sort of inform how your caretaking looks like by your, loved ones?
Well,
And so
let's use that comment to roll into a question about risk. So you hold both a JD and an MBA. That's a rare combination. How has the legal discipline of spotting risk and liability influenced your approach to aggressive growth and scaling, which often requires taking massive leaps of faith?
yeah, so it's like having 2 brains in your head where, like, the MBA tells you, like, "Take all the risks and take, like, really good risks because that's how you grow, because that's
Right.
how we talk about things in the tech industry," and then being educated as a lawyer to basically be risk avoidant 360, right? And so that fine balance is what sort of happens for, I think, really successful startups, which is that, what you're looking at is pushing the edge around technology and what you can do and what you can help people with, but understanding there's certain types of constraints, which is what makes it ideal to be sort of in the type of company that we are in today. Because when you see sort of originally what was happening in, Web 1.0, there were very riskless sort of pushes around innovation technology. So we were scaling at, you know, unprecedented, ways in hypergrowth, but most of it in non-regulatory areas. So like B2B, like productivity growth. And so,
Right.
how can we optimize commerce? Like all of those things are pretty much lacking constraint. What we're seeing now in 3.0 or 4.0, whatever, sort of stage that we think we're in here, is that you're seeing a lot of us tackle what is much more challenging regulated areas. And so that could be pharmaceutical development using AI, or in our case, looking at hyper personalized monitoring care. And so this is sort of where I think if you're looking at the future generations of CEOs and executives, that balance of understanding regulatory risks as well as like being able to understand those risks and still also be brave enough and assertive enough to say like, we understand what those risks are, but this is how we're going to leapfrog, in terms of bringing better experiences and better outcomes for, everybody involved, right?
I,
Otherwise, we're never going to get those kind of AI
right.
technology that's going to identify like breast cancer 5 years from now,
Right.
right?
I love that phrase. We need to be brave enough, right? Because whether we're in a regulated industry or not, there are business risks, and we need to take steps forward that are maybe like walking on a ledge of a cliff, but ultimately that's where the progress is going to happen by us managing those risks, but taking those steps to be brave and move forward. So I love that way of thinking.
Yeah, I think I grew up in Web 1.0, and I remember there's big signs in our offices that said, "Ready, fire, aim."
Oh, right.
So, my goodness, I feel like we live in a world today where we're talking about calculated risk because to your point, everything can be a risk. If we talk about things with people today, they have such fears about AI. And so
Yeah,
famously like known for like interviews saying that I don't fear actually AI coming because I think the reality is that AI is coming to help us exponentially grow any number of areas in areas healthcare, especially and areas in any number of areas. And why I'm not afraid of sort of, that sort of bravery and taking that risk, educated risk, is because it's a tool. Ultimately, we serve, you know, a society today that requires some sort of intervention from people to make judgment calls because AI is amazingly great in terms of sorting data and making initial sort of assessments, but the world that we live in is incredibly complex. And I have not yet seen, and perhaps have not even seen close to it, the capability of the AI to basically solve really complex issues that require a human um, empathy,
right,
ability to solve complex issues, empathy, any of those things, because we don't live in a world where cold, hard, feedback is the only methodology to deal with things, right? It's always proxied by um, human sort of the incredible human sort of nature of being human.
right. Well,
So
let's continue to talk about AI because it's one of my favorite topics when I work with CEOs. So, AI, it's evolving, what you're talking about is subtleties in an interaction with a human that AI is not good at. It's the edge cases. It's the example of, oh, why don't we have true self-driving automobiles everywhere? It's because those edge cases take a very, very long time for AI to understand. And if you're interacting with someone at the later stage of their life and something happens, the AI doesn't have the full context. And so talk to us a little bit about where AI fits into your product strategy.
yeah, so we are when we look at AI, we absolutely, though we seem like a boring, I fall and I can't get up business, we are actually fully invested, developed, have patents around things like AI and very cool things like personal physics engines to like ensure that our AI don't hallucinate, like really doing some cool things, which I know is shocking, right? Because it's a
Well,
focus.
no, tell us about the personal physics engine. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, so the reality is that AI is incredibly good at modeling any number of things, right? And it's actually creating scenarios and giving feedback on any number of things that could happen. It's actually much better at generating scenarios than anything else in the world, but it's actually fully capable of also making things up as a scenario that actually cannot exist in the physical world. Like, people can see it physically in like six fingers or like eight toes, like in photos,
Right.
um, because that is not necessarily not a possibility, but certainly it's not probable.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
so,
Right.
in a particular case, for example, do we determine if something is a fall? And so AI should be used to generate like any number of things based on the inputs of, blood glucose level, like, blood pressure, med adherence, like the actual fall and the sort of prone of the body, the sound of the voice, the vibration of anything. And it will create a number of scenarios to say yes, no, or say like this definitely seems like a fall. But the reality is that it's going to hallucinate some scenarios and you have to toss those things out. But how do you identify scenarios? The reason how you do it is you basically say, this is not physically possible. And
Mm.
it's not personally possible for like 70-year-old grandma, Mrs. Smith, to actually do a backflip down the stairs in some kind of like dragon, like crouching tiger scenario. And also she lives in a one-story home. And so
Right.
the data might indicate this, and you have built a scenario in which case that this could happen, the probability of this happening is next to null because it's grounded by a personal physics engine that actually eliminates some portions of the hallucinations that could come about. Because what
Oh,
you want to
got
have
it.
in a healthcare scenario is to basically say, hey, like, you know, you're bogging down the caretaker with any number of scenarios that actually is not applicable. And hallucinations are really, really bad. It's not like looking at a photo of six toes or
Right.
six. right? That's just funny. But in this particular case, it's life and death, right?
Right,
And
right, right.
so, so this is sort of the exciting sort of aspects of it, and whether or not things are really truly edge cases or not makes a difference. When I was working in retail, understanding the edge cases of whether or not you look good in like lime green or not look lime green is like what I call serendipity. Like sometimes you will look good in just that one shade of lime green. And so you want people to be able to have that discerning people eye to say that looks beautiful. And that's an edge case. And your
Right.
plan never is going to give you, it's always going to tell you look horrible in green because 99% of the scenario is no good, right?
R
That's okay because I cannot program serendipity in my AI for subjective sort of issues. But when it comes to things like, breast cancer, right? And I sat in a panel with somebody else who's an AI identifying breast cancer in visuals, and I'm identifying like what looks good or not in like clothing. Kind of felt frivolous, and they're doing something really interesting, but their edge cases have meaning. And so when I
Right.
work here, my edge cases have true meaning, right? And it becomes very difficult to say, what should be eliminated and not. And so you start looking for methodologies and technology to help ground those, um, the excesses of AI, because you wanted to make all the scenarios possible, but you really wanted to ground it in real world physics. And so that's
Well,
what.
yep, fantastic. And the good news here is what you're doing in the business and with AI is definitely not frivolous. It's having real meaning to people who have needs, and you're able to solve some of those needs, and AI is part of that. And I hope it becomes a bigger and part of the solution. And I suspect it will. So, Shailin, that's all I have for today. And I really appreciate you joining. So, how can people reach you?
Folks can find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/C Simmons, Simmons. You can find me at Chia-Lin Simmons, my full name, on Instagram. And I do not hang out, unfortunately, at X anymore. Just gets a little busy. So, but you can find me on LinkedIn and you can find me on Instagram. So,
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your journey.
thank you so much. And please, if you have a chance, go visit www.logicmark.com if you're a sandwich generation person who have needs for your family members.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today's episode of The Scaling CEO. If you found this valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a fellow CEO who could benefit. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a quick rating as it really helps more people find the show. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. See you next time for more proven strategies to grow your business and leadership.